Welcome to this brief introduction to the world of undersea communications. Before we begin, you may find a little history helpful. The first cable across the English Channel was laid by a converted tug called Goliath in 1850 using a drum fixed on her deck. Following improvements to cable design, HMS Agamemnon succeeded in a crossing of the Atlantic in 1857. Although the early cables were unreliable, from 1860 onwards better communications were established using Isambard Kingdom Brunel's amazing ship the Great Eastern. Such was their success that by 1901 a large network had been established, as is shown by this map printed by the Eastern Telegraph Company. Although originally existing ships were used, specialist designs soon made their appearance, and they became instantly recognizable by their distinctive bow shape, designed to enable ease of cable handling. Our film takes place on a laying ship called Cable Venture, of just over 8,900 tons, launched in 1962 for a German company. In 1975 she was bought and refitted by Cable and Wireless, and I served in her as a third officer in 1979. Depending on the size of the cable, she could lay up to 2,400 nautical miles at one stretch. No two cable lays are the same, and each presents unique challenges. They require very careful planning, including a thorough survey of the seabed to find the best route. Each will contain a number of amplifiers to boost and maintain signal strength and integrity. These are called repeaters and will be inserted during manufacture, the number and type varying depending on the cable's design. Cable Venture has 4 special holes known as cable tanks, where the completed cable will be stowed for transit. To avoid damage, the repeaters are stowed in a stack on the cable deck, outside of and above the tank, and each time one comes on board, the cable is led out to the stack, the repeater is secured, and the following section of the cable is returned to the tank. Thus you can see that loading is a very skilled job if a tangled heap is to be avoided. We're laying a cable from Tripoli to Benghazi in Libya, a distance of some 370 miles. This will take us about 5 days at our average laying speed of around 2 to 3 knots. Our first job is to join the cable on board with the landward end at Tripoli before getting underway with the actual lay. Although some cables are very heavily armoured, ours only needs to be of a light design due to the generally easy nature of the seabed in this area. Here you can see a cut down section of it with its outer wrapping removed. This cable has a copper central conductor, which is a bit old-fashioned now, since most modern cables now use fibre optic technology. Since the ship cannot sail close to the beach, the cable is led out from the shore installation into deep water, suspended on floats or airbags, as in this example. This is known as the shore end. A small anchor, like this, is used to stop it from moving about. Cable is difficult to handle easily, so at its seaward end a long section of light rope, or sometimes light chain, is attached to make the initial stage of recovery easier. This section is often known as the cable's tail. We now slowly approach the shore end, and when in the right place we grapple for the tail, a process requiring skill and precision, and sometimes needing several attempts before we succeed. Once caught, however, the tail can be hauled aboard and the main work can begin. A separate winch is rigged in the bows to recover the small anchor, which is then detached from the rope and stowed away safely for future use. We're now safely attached to the shore end, and we can start the process of recovering the cable itself. Since each cable is unique, we have to be ready for anything, and hauling ropes or chains is an inherently dangerous activity. Therefore, only essential crew members are allowed on the foredeck at this time. The tail is led to a winch, which holds the weight of the shore end easily, leaving the crew behind it in safety, ready to store it away under cover. Eventually, patience pays off, and the final wire strop attached to the cable appears from the depths. The speed of recovery is kept to a minimum here, in order to avoid accidents at this late stage. We certainly don't want any kinks in the cable, so a winch drum with a large diameter is used to draw it in. We need to recover a sufficient amount to allow us to have enough loose end available so that we can move it about easily. Before we can remove it from the winch, however, we must do something about the heavy weight of the cable hanging over the bows. To deal with this, we use a rope fixed to the deck, which is then wrapped round the cable with a special knot, and is called a stopper. This example shows a stopped rope, but the principle is the same. The cable is then held by this rope, and the inboard end can be released safely. The foredeck now becomes a hive of activity, as preparations begin to splice both cable sections together. Here on the port or left side, a group is working on the shore end to remove its outer wrappings and insulation, while an experienced cable engineer works to prepare the core. Here it is, all ready for splicing. On the other side, to starboard, another group is performing the same rituals on the inboard end. Although this all may look really chaotic, the foredeck is really a very organised place. Everyone here is skilled at what they do and are performing tasks which they've done many times before. With both ends prepared, a small tent is erected to provide a clean and wind-free area where the intricate connections can be made safely. When all is completed, the cable engineers test the continuity and integrity of the join before the cable is released, and once they're satisfied, it's then paid back out over the bows using the small forward cable engine, this time in reverse, ready for the actual laying to begin. Dead slow ahead is the order of the day as the propellers begin to edge us forward on our journey. The laying operation is always carried out over the stern or rear end of the ship, and the cable always looks so tiny and frail as it disappears beneath the sea. The likely weather conditions are always a factor to be considered when a system is planned. Fortunately this time, the weather has remained peaceful throughout, since bad weather can be a real problem and cause serious damage in rough conditions. The main cable engine is situated aft and consists of a number of pairs of rubber-tired wheels which grip the cable and draw it out of the holding tanks. The wheels are individually sprung, so that when a repeater appears, they lift independently and propel it gently but firmly down the channel to the sea. The ship's speed is now being controlled by the manoeuvring officer from a cabin in the stern, while the officer on the bridge ensures that we follow the precise track laid down for us by the cable's owner. As I mentioned before, our speed is maintained at around 2 to 3 knots. When a repeater is encountered, the manoeuvring officer reduces the speed to around 1 knot, and as the repeater goes overside, he informs the bridge. The precise location can then be plotted on the chart. Nowadays satellite navigation makes this job easy, but before its introduction, when out of sight of land, sextants would be used to fix our position using the sun and the stars, which actually, since no radio or mechanical aids were available at the time, I think gave one a much greater sense of achievement. During the transit, each department, deck officers, engine room officers and cable engineers, keep watches, 4 hours on and 8 hours off, and uniquely during laying, this means that 2 navigating officers are on watch at one time. Occasionally an interested spectator hitches a ride, but perhaps he's just tired. It may seem monotonous as mile after mile of cable is discharged, but it's actually very satisfying when everything is completed as planned. Well, we've come to the end of this little film, so thank you very much for watching, and I do hope that you found it interesting.